So, picture this. You see a video online, maybe scrolling through TikTok, and it shows you how to supposedly get, like, premium features for an app. Or maybe activate some software for free.
Yeah, those always look tempting.
Right. And it tells you to just run a quick command in Windows. Sounds easy enough.
Too easy.
Exactly. You run the command, you think you're getting a sweet deal. But, you've actually just invited malware onto your system.
Yep. Ready to steal your passwords, your data, maybe even dip into your crypto wallet if you have one.
And that's, just one kind of threat we're seeing. At the other end, you've got attackers quietly turning old, forgotten hardware, maybe that router stuffed in the back of your home office closet, the one you haven't thought about, let alone updated, in years.
Oh, yeah, we all have one of those somewhere.
They're turning those into part of these huge global botnets, and you might never even know what's happening.
These aren't like theoretical risks anymore. They're happening right now.
Absolutely. Welcome, everyone, to Coding. This is your weekly deep dive into the latest in cybersecurity. We sift through the news, the trends, pull back the curtain a bit, and really try to bring you the essential info you need.
Yeah, cut through the noise. Our mission really is to unpack these often complex topics, looking at recent reports and research, and help you understand not just what's going on, but crucially, why it matters to you and what you might actually be able to do about it.
And we've been digging into quite a range of things lately, everything from attacks on the actual hardware foundations we rely on.
So vulnerabilities hiding in the software supply chain, the services we use every day.
Direct threats aimed right at users, like those TikTok videos.
And even looking at how policy shifts, like debates around encryption, could affect our online security down the line.
Okay, so let's start right at that base layer, the hardware. Network devices, it seems, are really becoming prime targets.
Exactly. Routers are definitely a big focus, especially the older ones. For instance, researchers over at Sequoia recently flagged a new botnet they've called ViciousTrap.
ViciousTrap. Okay. Sounds appropriately named. What's it after?
It's exploiting a known and actually high-severity flaw. It's tracked as CVE 2023-2118.
Okay.
This vulnerability exists in the web management interface of several older Cisco small business RV series routers. We're talking models like the RV01 Speen, RV042, RV042G, RV082, RV320, and RV325.
So, older small business gear, what's the flaw let them do?
Well, the core issue is improper input validation, basically how the router handles incoming HTTP packets to its web interface.
Right. So if an attacker can get authenticated somehow, maybe default passwords weren't changed or credentials leaked elsewhere.
Exactly. If they get that authenticated access, they can inject malicious commands just by sending crafted requests to the web interface.
And here's the kicker, I bet. Cisco isn't patching this one, are they?
You got it. These devices are past their end-of-life date. No more patches.
The unsupported hardware curse strikes again. It feels like we talk about this all the time.
It's a huge, persistent problem.
So how does ViciousTrap actually use this flaw to, build its botnet army?
So once they exploit the vulnerability, ViciousTrap runs this shell script they call netghost.
Netghost, okay.
And what the script does is it redirects incoming traffic from certain ports on the compromised router, redirects it to infrastructure the attacker controls.
Huh. So it's like setting up a little listening post or a honeypot right on your router.
Yeah, exactly. To intercept network traffic flowing through it. Pretty sneaky.
And how widespread is this ViciousTrap?
Sequoia's report mentioned they found almost 5,300 devices compromised. That's across 84 countries.
Wow. Any particular hotspots?
Yeah, the biggest chunk, around 850 devices, was actually in Macau. They traced the attacks starting around March 2025, initially all coming from just a single IP address.
Any idea who might be behind it?
Well, the interesting clue is that the attackers apparently reused an undocumented web shell, one that was seen before in another botnet called PolarEdge.
PolarEdge.
Yeah.
Rings a bell. Didn't that also use this same Cisco vulnerability?
It did, yeah. Back in February 2025, PolarEdge hit about 2,000 devices, targeting not just Cisco, but also ASUS, QNAP, and Synology gear using that same CVE. Based on analyzing the tools and tactics, Sequoia suggests the actors behind ViciousTrap might be Chinese.
It just hammers home the risk, doesn't it? Using unsupported hardware is like leaving your digital front door wide open. Even old known bugs get recycled for massive attacks because the patches just aren't coming.
It's a fundamental weak link. And,
Yeah.
it's not just Cisco. We've got another example right here. Researchers at Grey Noise recently uncovered a very similar, but maybe even stealthier, campaign targeting thousands of older ASUS routers.
ASUS too. Okay, so it's a pattern. How are they breaking into the ASUS ones?
Well, the initial way in often seems to be pretty basic brute forcing weak passwords or exploiting authentication bypass flaws on routers that weren't properly secured in the first place.
The low-hanging fruit.
Right. But once they're in, they leverage another known flaw. CVE 2023-397A0. It's a command injection vulnerability, also rated high severity, 8.8 out of 10.
Wait a minute. CVE 2023-397A0. Wasn't that identified way back in September 2023? I thought ASUS put out firmware updates for that.
They absolutely did, but the attackers are banking on the fact that many users just don't update their router firmware, so they're still actively exploiting it.
Okay, so they exploit the known flaw on unpatched routers. What makes this campaign particularly nasty?
It's their persistence method. They're installing a backdoor, but they're putting it directly into the router's non-volatile memory, the NVRAM.
NVRAM. Okay, that's where settings are stored.
Yeah.
Stuff that survives a reboot. So you're saying this backdoor, it sticks around even if you turn the router off and on again.
Exactly. And potentially, it could even survive certain types of firmware updates, though that depends. The point is, it gives them long-term access without needing to constantly draw obvious malware files later on. Super stealthy.
Wow.
Grey Noise actually described these tactics, the stealth, using built-in system features for persistence, trying hard to avoid detection. They said it's consistent with more advanced long-term operations. They even mentioned potential associations with APT actors or ORB networks.
APTs. Advanced Persistent Threats. So maybe state-sponsored groups or very well-resourced criminal organizations.
Possibly. They didn't make a firm attribution, but they suggested it points towards a sophisticated adversary who's playing the long game.
So these aren't just quick hits. They're setting up shop inside these routers. How many devices are we talking about?
Grey Noise reported thousands of devices compromised already, and they noted the number was steadily increasing.
That's genuinely unsettling.
Yeah.
So what's the key takeaway for someone listening right now, thinking about their router at home or in their small office?
Look, this is a direct threat to you. Your device could be one of those thousands. The critical thing to understand is attackers are hitting unpatched known flaws and using these really sneaky persistence tricks.
Right.
So, rule number 1. If your router is so old the manufacturer isn't giving you security updates anymore, it's a major liability. Seriously consider replacing it.
Time for an upgrade.
Definitely. And for routers that are still supported, you absolutely have to keep that firmware updated. That's the main thing attackers are relying on you not doing that.
Okay, so that covers the hardware weak spots. Let's move up the stack a bit. What about vulnerabilities hitting the software supply chain and the critical services we all use?
Yeah, there's been some worrying activity there, too. A recent report from Socket, the cybersecurity researchers, highlighted a pretty significant risk for software developers, which, indirectly affects everyone using modern software.
So, what did they find?
They found dozens of malicious packages uploaded to NPM.
NPM, the Node Package Manager. Huge ecosystem for JavaScript developers.
Exactly. Socket identified 60 specific malicious packages, uploaded since about May 12th, 2025, all linked back to just 3 user accounts, and their main attack method was typo-squatting.
The classic trick. Create a package name that's almost identical to a popular, legitimate one.
Yep, like Flipper plugins instead of Flipper plugin, or React-Sturm2 instead of React-Sturm. They're counting on a developer mistyping npm install.
And if they make that typo,
these malicious packages had a post-install script baked in. That's code designed to run automatically as soon as the package is installed.
nasty. What did this script do?
It was essentially an info stealer. It was designed to grab sensitive data from the developer's machine, things like host names, internal IP addresses, the user's home directory path, the current working directory, which could reveal project details, usernames, even the system's DNS server settings.
So grabbing system config and user info.
Right, and it also had checks built in to see if it was running inside a cloud environment or a sandbox, probably to try and evade detection by security tools or researchers.
Sounds like it was definitely targeting developer machines or maybe those automated build systems, CI/CD pipelines.
That seems very likely, yeah. Places where accessing credentials or source code would be really valuable. These 60 packages got downloaded about 3,000 times before Socket caught them and got them removed.
3,000 downloads isn't trivial.
No. And Socket also found evidence of another separate type of squatting campaign on NPM. This one involved 8 different packages that had been lurking for about 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah. And those had racked up 6,200 downloads. And this older campaign was apparently even more destructive, capable of deleting files, corrupting data, maybe even bricking the system entirely.
Wow. The thought that just installing a seemingly normal dependency could wreck your machine or steal your keys is, well, it's terrifying for developers. But why should someone who isn't a developer care about this NPM stuff?
Because almost all modern software relies on these open source components, often pulled in via managers like NPM. If a malicious package gets into that supply chain upstream,
The risk flows downstream.
exactly, it can directly impact the security of the apps and websites you use every day. It's a supply chain attack. The initial target is the builder, but the end user bears the risk too. And for developers, obviously, the risk is immediate and severe.
So, okay, if you're a developer and you think you might have accidentally installed one of these, what's the immediate action plan?
The advice is pretty clear and urgent. First, immediately remove any package identified as malicious. Check the reports from Socket or similar security alerts.
Okay.
Second, run a full, thorough system scan for any lingering malware. Third, and this is absolutely critical, rotate your important credentials. Think API keys, passwords for code repositories like GitHub, cloud platform access keys, SSH keys, everything.
Assume they might have been compromised.
Assume the worst, yeah. And enable two-factor authentication, 2FA, absolutely everywhere you possibly can. Going forward, just be super careful when adding new packages. Double, triple check those names and the source.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, moving from the developer's local machine out to the cloud services businesses depend on. CISA, the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, put out a pretty serious warning recently about a breach at Commvault.
Yeah, that was significant. Commvault is a big player in data protection and backup. CISA warned that a breach there could put software as a service, or SaaS, companies globally at risk, and they mentioned potential nation-state hacker involvement.
Nation-state actors targeting backup providers. That sounds
yeah.
bad. What vulnerability did they use?
They apparently abused a zero-day vulnerability in Commvault's own software. It's tracked as CVE 2025-3928. The details were a bit sparse, but it was described as a flaw in the Commvault web server, exploitable by a remote attacker who already has authentication.
A 0 day, meaning Commvault didn't know about it before the attacker started using it.
Right, and the big concern wasn't just about Commvault's own systems, but the potential impact on their customers. CISA described it as part of a large-scale campaign that seemed specifically aimed at SaaS companies using Commvault. The fear was that the attackers might have managed to steal client secrets related to Commvault's metallic Microsoft 365 backup service.
Client secrets for M365 backups. That sounds like getting the keys to the kingdom for a company's cloud data.
That's exactly the worry. If attackers got those secrets, it could potentially give them unauthorized access to the M365 environments of Commvault's customers. That means getting at the actual backup data, or maybe even messing with the backups if those customers had stored their application secrets within the Commvault system.
That CISA added this bug to their known exploited vulnerabilities, their KE catalog, so quickly, that tells you how serious they viewed it.
It does, yeah. They added it on April 28, 2025. Commvault themselves confirmed that a, quote, handful of customers were targeted, and they moved fast to release patches in several versions of their software.
And CISA thought this might be bigger than just Commvault.
They seem to think so. They suggested this activity could be part of a wider campaign targeting various SaaS providers. They also pointed out common weaknesses attackers love to exploit, like companies using default security configurations or granting overly broad permissions, which makes an attacker's life much easier once they get that initial foothold.
So the big insight here is really about third-party risk, isn't it? Even if your company's security is top-notch, if you rely on a SaaS provider for something critical like backups, a breach on their end can blow back directly onto you.
Absolutely. Your security perimeter isn't just your own walls anymore. It extends to all your critical vendors. CISA did provide some specific mitigation advice for companies, things like closely monitoring their Microsoft Entra ID audit logs and carefully reviewing application registrations and service principals for any signs of suspicious activity related to Commvault access.
Good technical advice there. And speaking of critical services being hit, there was also news about MathWorks getting impacted by ransomware.
Yes, MathWorks, the company behind MATLAB and Simulink tools used by literally millions of engineers, scientists, researchers worldwide. They confirmed a ransomware attack started around Sunday, May 18th, 2025.
That's huge. What was the immediate impact?
It caused pretty significant disruption to their IT systems. Some of the key online applications their customers rely on, things like MATLAB Answers, the Cloud Center, the file exchange where people share code, they became unavailable. Internal systems for their staff were hit too.
How long did the disruption last? Were they able to recover quickly?
Well, the reports indicated that as of May 27th, which was over a week later, they were still actively working on restoring systems. They brought in external experts, but things like the file exchange were still described as being in a degraded state, meaning not fully functional.
That really shows how crippling ransomware can be, even for a major software company. It's not just about the data. It's about grinding operations to a halt for potentially long periods.
Definitely.
Do we know who was behind the MathWorks attack or if customer data was stolen?
They did notify federal law enforcement who are investigating, but as of the time of the reports, no specific ransomware group had publicly claimed responsibility. And critically, it was still unknown if any sensitive company data or, importantly, customer data had been exfiltrated. The lack of a public claim about stolen data sometimes suggests negotiations might be happening behind the scenes, but that's just speculation at this point.
Right. It's just a powerful reminder that ransomware hits hard, disrupting widely used tools and causing damage far beyond just encrypting files.
Yeah, it shows no organization is truly immune, no matter how large or critical they seem.
Okay. So we've looked at hardware, we've looked at software supply chains and services. Let's pivot now to threats that are really aimed squarely at individual users, often using some pretty clever deceptive tactics. We started the show talking about those AI fake videos on TikTok. That feels particularly nasty.
It really does. This was flagged by TrendMicro researchers, and it's quite a novel method. Attackers are using AI-generated video, AI-generated voiceovers to create these realistic-looking TikToks designed purely to trick people into installing malware.
How exactly do they bait the hook?
The videos pretend to offer something people want for free, like activation keys for Windows or Microsoft Office, or maybe getting premium features unlocked in popular apps like Spotify or the CapCut video editor. The AI voice then walks you through this apparently simple process.
And that process involves running a command, like we mentioned.
Precisely. The video literally instructs the user, open the Windows Run dialog box, type in this specific PowerShell command, which is shown right there on the screen in the video, and hit Enter.
Which is, let's be clear, absolutely not how you legitimately activate software or get premium features for anything.
Not even close. And when you run that PowerShell command, it reaches out and downloads a malicious script. That script then deploys some nasty info stealers, specifically Vidar and StealC were mentioned.
Info stealers, designed to just scrape up all your valuable personal data.
Pretty much, yeah. They can grab login credentials, save in your browser, credit card numbers, web browser cookies, which can sometimes be used to bypass two-factor authentication, cryptocurrency, wallet files, or keys, even 2FA codes if they're stored insecurely. They can also take screenshots of what you're doing.
And the scary part is TikTok's own algorithm could potentially help spread these malicious videos.
That's the concern, yes. The platform is designed to promote content that gets engagement. TrendMicro found one example of these malicious videos that had racked up over 500,000 views.
Wow.
And they noted the videos were often highly similar, suggesting they're likely being generated and uploaded automatically at scale.
What did the researchers say makes this a significant departure from older methods? What's really new here?
The key innovation, the really sneaky part, is embedding the malicious instruction, the actual command you need to type directly within the video content itself. In the past, attackers might put a shady link in the video description or in the comments.
Right, where automated security scanners might have a chance to spot it.
Exactly. But by putting the dangerous instruction in the video, delivered by the AI voice and shown on screen, they're potentially bypassing those standard security checks that focus on text descriptions and links.
That is incredibly devious. It leverages the platform's reach and plays on people's desire for free stuff.
It's a really clear, concerning example of how AI is being weaponized for social engineering and malware delivery right on mainstream platforms people use every day. The absolute critical takeaway here for you is never, ever run commands directly in your operating system based on instructions from some random online video. Especially if it's promising free software or premium goodies, be incredibly skeptical.
Good advice. Don't run random code. Seems obvious, but these videos can be convincing.
They prey on that moment of lapsed judgment.
Okay, another threat targeting users flips things around. It preys on your desire to be safe. We're talking about fake websites impersonating legitimate antivirus software.
Right, using your trust against you. Domain tools researchers recently analyzed a campaign doing just that.
What do they find?
They highlighted a specific example, a malicious domain, bitdefender-download.com. If you went there, it presented a web page titled Download for Windows that looked remarkably similar to the actual official Bitdefender download page.
But not quite identical.
Exactly. Subtle differences, maybe some text missing, slightly different layout or fonts if you looked really closely, but convincing enough at first glance.
And if you click the download button on this fake site,
Instead of getting the Bitdefender installer, you downloaded a file named storeinstaller.exe, which, surprise, surprise, wasn't an installer for Bitdefender.
what was it?
It was actually a dropper, a piece of malware designed to install other malware. In this case, it contained configurations to deploy several nasty payloads.
VenomRat. RRAT remote access Trojan. That gives the attacker control.
Full control, pretty much. VenomRat lets them steal logins, log your keystrokes, access your webcam, run commands remotely. They also found it dropping Silent Trinity and the Storm Kitty Stealer.
So, multiple types of malware, just from one fake download. What was the ultimate goal?
It looked like the main motivation was financial. Stealing cryptocurrency seemed to be a focus, and also likely selling access to the compromised Windows systems on underground forums to other criminals.
And this wasn't just an isolated fake antivirus site. They saw connections to other scams.
Yeah, domain tools found that the technical infrastructure, the servers, the domains used for this fake Bitdefender site, overlapped with infrastructure used to impersonate other targets around the same time. They mentioned fake sites for banks like Armenian ID Bank and the Royal Bank of Canada, and also some generic IT service provider impersonations.
So the same criminals are likely just swapping out the disguise depending on who they want to trick.
Seems that way. It shows they run diverse campaigns using the same underlying setup.
The insight here is really stark. Attackers know you want to be secure, so they'll disguise their malware as security software. They turn that trusted brand into the delivery mechanism.
Absolutely. Your best defense here is just extreme vigilance about where you download anything. Rule of thumb. Always go directly to the official vendor website. Type the known, correct address into your browser yourself. Don't rely on search engine results, which can sometimes be manipulated. And definitely don't click download links from emails or social media.
And double-check that URL in the address bar before you click download or enter any info.
Crucial step. Make sure it's the real domain, not a lookalike.
Okay, one last user-focused threat, and this one might seem lower stakes at first. Streaming service accounts. We saw that Kaspersky report about millions of login details being leaked.
Yeah, that was a big number. They identified over 7 million compromised streaming accounts just in 2024. That included services like Netflix, which accounted for over 5 million of those, plus Prime Video, Disney Plus AC, HBO Max, Apple TV Plus R. It was a global issue, with lots of leaks coming from places like Brazil, Mexico, and India.
Now, the report made a really important point.
Yeah.
This wasn't because Netflix or Disney Plus themselves got breached, right?
Correct. That's key. The logins weren't stolen directly from the streaming giants. Instead, they were typically harvested through other methods, things like malicious spyware browser extensions that users might have installed.
Those sneaky extensions that promise features but steal data.
Exactly. Or users getting tricked by phishing sites, fake login pages designed to look exactly like the real Netflix or Prime Video login, where they then enter their username and password.
Okay, so the credentials get stolen elsewhere, and then attackers find they also work for streaming services. Is there really a big financial risk just from someone getting access to your Netflix account? Your payment details are usually pretty safe there, aren't they?
Generally, yes. The billing info stored directly by the streaming service itself isn't usually compromised in these kinds of leaks. The real danger, the crucial point for you, the listener, comes down to one thing: password reuse.
The Achilles heel of online security for so many people.
It really is. Think about it. If you use the exact same password for your Netflix account as you do for, say, your main Amazon account.
Where you have your credit card saved, your purchase history.
Exactly. Or maybe you use the same password for your Apple ID, which is tied to iCloud, app purchases, maybe Find My iPhone, potentially lots of personal data. Suddenly, that attacker who got your low-value streaming login now has the key to unlock your much more valuable financial or personal accounts.
So even if you think, it's just my streaming account, who cares? If you reuse that password, the leak becomes a potential gateway to identity theft or serious financial loss.
That's the critical takeaway. Your seemingly unimportant accounts become dangerous if they share passwords with important ones. Now, thankfully, services like Amazon and Apple offer strong two-factor authentication, and you should absolutely have that enabled on those high-value accounts if you don't already.
Good point. 2FA adds a vital layer.
It does. But the underlying problem of password reuse still makes these breaches risky.
So what's the action plan if you're hearing this and getting a bit nervous about your streaming passwords?
Okay, first step. Change your passwords for your streaming services right away. But more importantly, step back and think about all your online accounts. Any service that handles money, stores sensitive personal info, or is linked to other important accounts like your primary email, your bank, Amazon, Apple ID needs a unique, strong password, period.
And managing unique, strong passwords for everything sounds hard.
It is hard to do manually, which is why using a password manager is basically essential these days. There are great free options, paid options, ones built into browsers and operating systems. Let the manager generate and remember complex, unique passwords for every site. That breaks the chain of risk from password reuse.
Good advice. Use a password manager. And, of course, stay vigilant about those phishing emails and dodgy downloads because that's where these credentials often get stolen in the first place.
Exactly. Prevention is key.
Okay. Wow. That was quite a tour through the threat landscape from the hardware up to the services and down to the direct user attacks.
And sort of hovering over all of this, or maybe underpinning it, is the whole policy environment. How governments and regulations interact with technology can fundamentally shape our digital security and privacy.
Right. You're talking about that ongoing debate, particularly in the EU right now, about potentially weakening encryption, which has a lot of cybersecurity experts really worried.
Exactly. There was a joint letter published around May 26, 2025. It had 89 signatories, big names from the tech industry, civil society groups, cybersecurity researchers, all urging the European Commission to basically rethink its approach on encryption.
What's the background here? The EU has this ProtectEU strategy, right? And
Yeah.
part of that involves looking at technology and encryption.
Yeah, there's a technology roadmap on encryption. And the tension comes from law enforcement agencies who often argue, understandably, that strong end-to-end encryption makes it much harder, sometimes impossible, for them to investigate serious crimes like terrorism or child exploitation because they can't access the communications content.
That's the core dilemma. Security versus privacy and investigation needs.
It is. But the experts who signed this letter are arguing very strongly that deliberately weakening encryption, say, by mandating government backdoors or forcing companies to build in ways to bypass encryption, would actually undermine overall security for everyone. They frame encryption as a key cybersecurity tool. It's what protects our online banking, our private messages, business communications, critical infrastructure controls. Weakening it, they argue, makes individuals, companies, even government institutions more vulnerable to cyber attacks from criminals and hostile states. They even point out that agencies like the FBI and CISA in the US actively encourage people and organizations to use strong encryption to improve their security.
This isn't the first time the EU has grappled with this, is it?
Right.
I remember the chat control idea.
Exactly. That previous proposal, which involved ideas for scanning private communications for illegal content, faced huge backlash over privacy concerns and ultimately didn't get enough support to move forward. Plus, the European Court of Human Rights has actually ruled against government mandates that would break encryption in the past, calling them essentially illegal under human rights law.
And now the focus seems to be shifting slightly, maybe towards specific technologies.
Well, an EU expert group recently flagged VPNs, virtual private networks, as a key challenge for law enforcement investigations. That was apparently the first time VPNs were specifically highlighted in this context, alongside the usual concerns about encrypted messaging apps and encrypted devices.
So this letter from the 89 experts is basically a strong pushback, saying, hold on, weakening these tools is dangerous.
Pretty much. They're urging the Commission to reframe its approach in that technology roadmap. They want a really careful assessment of whether weakening encryption is even technically feasible without causing massive collateral damage, and what the broader societal, legal, and technical impacts would be. They're calling for a balance that fully includes industry and civil society concerns about security and privacy alongside law enforcement's needs.
This whole policy debate feels really fundamental. It directly impacts everyone listening: the security of the apps you use, the privacy of your connections, maybe even your ability to use tools like VPNs effectively in the future. It's that constant tension between state security needs and the individual's right to secure private communication.
It's definitely a complex issue, yeah. No easy answers, but the implications, whichever way it goes, are pretty profound for our digital lives.
Absolutely. Okay, so to kind of wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
it's been a bit of a whirlwind. We've seen how old, unsupported hardware like routers is being actively turned into botnets.
How vulnerabilities lurking way upstream in the software supply chain or within the SaaS providers we trust can create significant risks for our data and systems, even if we do everything right ourselves.
And how attackers are getting really creative, using AI on platforms like TikTok or spoofing trusted brands like antivirus companies to trick users directly.
And then layered on top, or perhaps underneath, is that ongoing policy discussion about core technologies like encryption, which really could shape the future digital safety landscape for all of us.
Given all of that, what are the essential protective steps for you, the listener, trying to navigate this complex environment? It really seems to boil down to focusing on some core proactive habits.
I think so. First off, take a hard look at your devices, especially network gear like routers. If they're old and not getting security updates anymore, it's time to replace them, seriously. For the devices that are supported, make absolutely sure you're installing those patches and updates promptly. Don't put it off.
Second, password hygiene is just non-negotiable. Use strong, unique passwords for every single online service. Enable two-factor authentication wherever you possibly can, especially for email, banking, social media, anything important, and honestly, just get a password manager. It makes unique passwords manageable.
Third, cultivate that healthy skepticism. Be super cautious about clicking links you weren't expecting, downloading software from sources you haven't verified 100%, or following instructions from online videos promising free stuff, especially if they involve running system commands. Always try to verify the source. Is this legit?
And finally, I guess, stay informed. Keep learning about the threats and best practices just like you're doing right now by tuning into this deep dive. Awareness is a huge part of the defense.
Couldn't agree more.
So here's maybe a final thought to leave you with. We live in this digital world where attackers are increasingly using automation, AI, exploiting all the complex connections between our systems. In that context, how does your own informed awareness, your own proactive security habits become maybe the most critical personal firewall you have protecting your digital life? Something to think about.